Hey everyone, Karen the Warp Spinster here. Thank you for spending some time with me today. In the last Sunday's episode, we were working with creating some custom stripes to put in this slice in this block. And we dinked around, and frankly, I did some things other than stripes with how I might complete this composition, and I edited those out and we'll share them later. But because of that, I only did a couple of stripes, and I like both of them. This was the first one, and then we talked about what would go here and here, so that's our sort of slide film strip, I guess. And then this one, which in some ways I really like, some ways I don't. The consensus in your comments tended to be this was too much, and I think I agree, depending on where the rest of the block and quilt might go. I did think, well, I know that I commented last time, I think that I would need to make this bottom strip, not the stripe, but this bottom strip wider, because I'm going to lose all of this in any seam. So I would need to make that wider. But I do like the stripe possibly on its own. And I'm going to be working on a couple of stripes that may or may not go with this particular piece, but just doing some more stripes today. And I want to introduce curves into them in one way or another. Lots of things we can still do with straight stripes, but I want to introduce some curves. And I think I'm going to start out with some 2.5-inch squares. Now I might just kind of keep the same colors in general that I have going on there in case I want to put them all together. So I'm going to start with a base of 2.5-inch squares sewed together. I'm not sure I did these in the order I had originally placed them, but it doesn't matter. I just didn't want those two pinks next to each other. Now, to introduce some curves, I have some options, of course. I'm going to continue with this black and white stripe theme just because I'm into black and white stripes at the moment. So I could do a thin curve that is appliqued on, and I can make the applique stitch as nondescript or as obvious as I like. And of course we have the same old question of which stripe do we use. I think, well, that's kind of funky, isn't it? Just to have, we could do it, that isn't a curve, but it's kind of interesting, different. And then we have this version where I cut it this direction. I think I like that better. And it would need to be curved, of course. I know there's definitely a difference of opinion about whether to use the wide stripe or the narrower stripe. And frankly, for me, it just kind of depends on the day. So that's a possibility, and curving it, of course. I could also, got the rattling plastic here. I could also use a plain black stripe. Doesn't demo very well at this width, does it? Or a plain white strip. Both of which, frankly, look kind of blah to me at this point. I'm so used to working with the stripes. I'm thinking that I really do like the wider stripe better in this instance, and maybe it's because this is wider. What would happen if I necessarily be in half, but had less of this? Depends on what it's used for. If it's a slice filler, then I would want it narrower. If it's going to be part of a piece that's just all different kinds of stripes, then definitely this width. I think I'm going to start out with this. So I will cut, if I cut this on the bias, of course, it's going to have a different effect because it will have a diagonal stripe in there instead of, do I not have any of those already cut? Yes, I do. So how will I feel about, well, that could be kind of interesting. All right, I forgot to grab my bias tape maker. How wide would I want this stripe? I could do my own. All right, I think I'm going to try it at a little wider. I could do that. It will look like a black and white barber pole instead of red and white. Are they red, white, and blue? Depends on the shop, I suppose. All right, so I'm going to make one that's fairly wide, and then I may try that cross stitch that I like. So I'm going to, all I'm going to do is just make bias tape without using the bias tape maker. This is wide enough. I think I can manage it. I'm back auditioning this width, and I'm almost thinking, I actually did a reasonably good job of making a consistently wide bias or strip here, although this is a little narrower. I wonder what it would look like if I purposely made it inconsistent. And I'm also wondering if I don't want to make this square's base a little narrower. I know I'm going to lose a 1/4 inch on each side. Well, I can always trim it down later, I guess. So, do I want to leave this as a little bit? Let's do it reasonably consistent first in the width of this strip. And Karen, remember this time to put stabilizer behind it before you do the first applique. Maybe that pink in there is what's bothering me. Maybe. What if I were to, yeah, I don't have any 2.5 inch squares cut at the moment for those two colors. Yeah, I think it is the pink that's bothering me. It would work to pull the pieces together. Remember, we've got, sorry, rattling plastic again. These two pieces also. So let's pretend this is going to be something that ties those two blocks together. And I'll go ahead with it. If we hate it, we have more fabric, right? So I'm going to, I don't know if I'll do the cross stitch or maybe I'll try out a different decorative stitch. Stay tuned and find out. I found this stitch and I really love it, but I don't think it's going to work for this application. I could make it narrower, I guess. It looks very modern, but these are going to run into each other and it's going to, I think, overpower the stripe effect. So I will find another stitch, but I'm going to hold this put a pin in it because I really like that stitch. I finally decided on a stitch that reminds me a little bit of railroad tracks, and I like it. It's a lot of thread. That's 2 stitches over everything. It actually would be, I think, pretty good for a raw edge as well, because it has a stitch that goes right on the edge and then stitches either side. So that would be a good one, though I didn't need that kind of coverage really, since that isn't a raw edge. Now this one looks like an ice cream truck or something to me. Cotton candy, I don't know. And I'm thinking, oh, you know what might have been kind of interesting would be to do black strips in between these, narrow black strips, or white strips in between. Would that be too much, do you think? I think a stripe in between would definitely be too much. Although we could put the stripe in between and then a solid black or white. I think it would need to be black. And the other thing we could do would be to cut a similar curve to this and then piece in a black piece at the top and maybe a black piece at the bottom, or a white piece at the bottom. In other words, you could just go crazy. We could also have done a decorative stitch behind here in kind of an opposite sort of curve. Might have been too much, might not, I don't know. I think I'm seeing all of this background. All right, before I do that, and I just might try it on one side here, at least. Let's try doing a curve with a strip of black and a strip of one of these. Do we have one wide enough that, well, yes, because I'm going to actually want these to be fairly narrow. Of course, I could do, you know me, I could do a curve with this. I think that would be kind of fun. So I'm going to, this stripe is going to be exactly this long because that's the length I have here. All right, I need to make allowance for a seam allowance. So, and then I'm just going to freehand a curve. Need to leave room to put something on the other side if I want to, or leave it straight if that's going to be a straight edge of, say, a block I'm going to do. So I want to make sure I keep my fingers out of the way here, but then I'm going to do a curve which is going to make them pretty gentle. Always watching my fingers. Not just watching them, keeping them out of the way. Pull those out and this piece out. I shall see you back here to show you how my curve turned out. We'll assume it's going to be great, right? Ta-da! Piece of cake, easy peasy. The curve is so gentle, it really was not at all difficult, and I pressed it toward the green. I could have pressed it open. I didn't want to press it toward the stripe because then the green would shadow through on the stripe. Now, so there's our stripe. We have choices as always. So I could do another curve up there, a different curve. If I could get my brain to cut a different curve instead of following that one. But I think that would be kind of fun. And let's see how wide we want that. Do we want that pretty narrow in there? Do we want it pretty wide? We're going to go with this. Actually, I'm going to go with this so I can see where I'm cutting here. That's going to be what I always have to think. This is going to be so to that. So I want that to have more possibilities there. Okay. Pardon me while I jiggle the table as I cut this. And I can cut down to there. All right. Fingers out of the way, and I do not want to cut this the same as that curve. So I have to be quite conscious to not go with my default. Always, 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 always watch your fingers or use a Kevlar glove. And never cut toward yourself. That piece goes out. Those are too narrow for my crumb box, so maybe I'll trim this off so that I don't get lost in where my curve, where my curve is. And there we are. Stay tuned. I quite like that. Instead of I kind of like it, I quite like it. And this, of course, could be just a base for other things that you want to do. You could continue on with curves. Maybe do a black and a white one or a smaller stripe. These smaller stripes. It's really working with 2 stripes here. I don't know. I think I might want a black strip in there before I do that, maybe. What are you saying to me as you are calling out? You know, you could just do a really interesting stripe and then you have to do all those curves. I hate to cut them, but then you could cut them and do as we did last time. We would cut that and then take the piece and move it over there. If I'm doing a piece that's all stripes, I could just keep going until I have a block that is this wide, just full of stripes. And then continue on with, do I have any more in those colors? Any strips cut? I don't think so. Oh, we've got this piece we could just toss in there because, you know, we can. So we did this simple stripe last time. No, we did it for the, yes, for a stripe, but that was part of the film stripe. See, I don't know about that white in there. And that may be just too many stripes. Black and white stripes in there. I like black and white stripes as much as the next person, maybe more than the next person. But that may be too much. And if we had, I'm making such a mess over here. If we had a white strip, say on this side, and again, we could do curves or put in a straight edge once in a while. That's too wide. White stripe, I think, strip. Or we could put these in as very narrow, almost like a little piping, before we do another strip, which might be wider, perhaps. Just do a little piping strip there. Maybe. Maybe not. Because do we want the curves to keep going? Another thing we could do, which was what I was going to say a long time ago before I went off on one of my tangents, is that we could do some of that fun fiber or threads that we go over the top, or do a decorative stitch over the top. Ooh, that one decorative stitch that I tried but wasn't appropriate for the first stripe we did, which I've lost now completely. No idea where it is. There it is. Could do that. Don't know if I want to do that. I'm more inclined to do funky fun threads going across there if I do anything with that. Or we could just, all right, this would be the simplest thing. I don't think it's my favorite option, but Emily certainly has a lot of opinions today, my iron. Would be to slice these, and we'll still get some curve in there, and then piece them back this way. So then would we want another stripe in between there, so that we have a stripe in between each of the colored strips? Maybe. But then we only have the curve. We wouldn't have the curve after we slice it and move this piece over. We'd have straight edges rather than curves, which is a possibility. Or we could have just a plain strip in here. You know, I wish we had that this was Procreate and we could say, just duplicate this and we'll try it. Have this in between, and then I don't think I can mimic this very well. I need to get out Procreate and do this, don't I? Maybe I'll just do that sometime, is play and Procreate with these to see how they might look. I think if I were going to do that, I would put just a narrow black strip in there maybe. And maybe curve that. Anyway, I'm inclined on this piece, to be honest with you, to just keep going with curves and just make a long thing with curves. I could, of course, always make these pretty narrow now. If I wanted a narrow stripe, if I'm doing a set-in stripe, a spliced stripe. And I wouldn't have to have this, it could be a straight line, but it doesn't have to be 90 degrees, because 90 degrees to what? Would be the question. I actually like that. What do you think? And I could run a thread down the middle. I'm going to, I have lots of fabric, right? I'm going to, all right, I have to imagine it with another 1/4 inch off there for a seam. Close your eyes if this is going to freak you out. It's freaking me out a little bit, I'm not going to lie. But I think I'm going to like it better. In my mind at the moment, I'm still doing, yes, thank you, Emily. I am still doing a a splice insert or a slice insert or whatever. Maybe not for the particular pieces we were looking at, but so I think it's probably going to be too much for this. Yes, that would overwhelm the rest of the design. So it may not be a spliced piece for here, but could still work somewhere. Or a piece on its own, maybe a border kind of thing. All right, so I have some blue here, some Krynic blue. Maybe, this is a pretty narrow braid, and pretty much wants to do what it wants to do. So it would be fairly nondescript depending on what stitch I used to couch it. I could make the stitch wider so that this appeared to be wider. And oh, by the way, I did, in fact, order another bobbin case for this machine so I can do play with some bobbin work, which I think some of you have probably done more than I have. So you can give me some tips while we learn together, the rest of us learn together. Maybe, but it's not doing much for me. Maybe I need more than one. I don't think so, but just in case. Krynic is having a party. Yeah, no. One at most, I'm not even sure about that. And now I'm wondering about a stitch down the sort of waving in and out. I honestly like that quite a lot on its own. It's just not very powerful, which might be exactly what you want in some quilts. And so maybe I should leave it for until I decide what I want to use it for, and then it may be just perfect, or I may want to add something to it. That black changes it quite a lot. And again, I think it would depend on where I was using it, whether or not I wanted to do that. It's kind of tones it down, makes it more somber isn't quite the right word, but more elegant maybe, and the white brightens it up. I think we already tried the one on each side and I'm not remembering it. It's a good way to compare. I can see either one of them depending on what I wanted to do. I'm not sure I see both of them. It's a puzzlement. Well, we've got lots of time probably to ponder those. Let's see what we do with, I'll do some more. Oh, here's an idea. Interesting. We can use these. I'm almost wondering if a crumb quilt kind of situation. Oh, so completely maybe unrelated to that, maybe not, is if we use, I'm going back to half square triangles again. I don't have very many of these sewed and none of them trimmed, and my trimmer isn't up here. This is a different blue, but we're going to try it anyway. So I'm going to sew up and trim a couple of these. I want another blue pair. And then we'll see if what's going on in my head is actually going to work in reality. These HSTs are the same size, just under 2 inches. I think you could do this with different sizes, maybe not hugely different, but since these are trimmings from folded back corners, they aren't necessarily going to be the same size when I trim them. I just trimmed these down. Some of them were 2 inches, some of them like 1 7/8-ish. So I just trimmed them to 1 7/8, but I think they could be a little bit variable. Anyway, so my plan is, you know I'm going to cut these, right? You just know I've got to slice them. Do I want to slice them evenly? No. I want them to stay the same width, but, and do I want to turn them? I might. All right, so I'm just going to, I need to make sure I have enough room for a seam allowance because these are pretty small to begin with. This may be looking familiar to you if you watched my half square triangle series. If you didn't, there's still time. And one more. Don't know exactly. Yeah, let's do one that's pretty close to half. Now, we're just going to rearrange these into a stripe in whatever way we might wish. We have a consistent width, so we don't have to worry about that. If we did uneven sizes, then we would be trimming the sides or making them a curve. And then we sew them together this way. Now I am seeing right away that we're going to lose a fair amount of these smaller pieces. But here we are. So I'm going to put these together. I'm liking this so far, truly. But I'm wondering if, of course, do we want to add in a little bit of a contrast in here? So maybe a little bit of black in there. I don't think I want just plain white. Been there, done that with other things, so it would certainly be an option. Or, you know where I'm going with this, we could put in a stripe, which is a diagonal. You're probably seeing this fine from on high. I'm looking at an angle and trying to press things down so I could see them. Don't hate that. Maybe. And our other, always an option, stripe. Depends on the look you want. Could go either way. I think I like a stripe better than I do just the plain black. I think it's maybe just my current obsession with stripes, black and white stripes. have that, and then you could just do different widths up and down the stripe. But I like doing these half square triangle things. Slicing those and sewing them back together as a stripe. I do like that. Which one of these do I prefer? My general inclination is usually for the wider stripe. I don't know if I want it to be diagonal. It will mimic these 45-degree angles. Let's see if I've got one here that's just a straight up stripe. Here we go. And we'll try that down here. Always an option to mix them, of course. Well, do you want the star to be the stripe, star of the show to be the black and white stripe, or these? I think the wider one is less of an accent than a statement. So I just have to decide if I want it to be a statement or an accent, or if I want to leave it out altogether. I think I want something in there. I just do. So I'm going to, I'll insert the wider stripe between these two. It isn't as if I don't have a few, probably 1,000 other of these triangles. So I'm going to start with that. Not sure, that may be too wide. Too wide inset, not the width of the stripe. Well, that may be too much too. What have I done back here? All right. I'm pressing these seams open, by the way, because with all those little half square triangles, there will be lots of bulk. If I have the stripes only every once in a great while, how will that be? I think that's just too wide, isn't it? I will fix that. I cut off just 1/4 of an inch, but it made all the difference. When pieces are this small, it doesn't take much to change the whole game. I might rather have that one that way, which is neither here nor there. Two decisions about this. If we do these two and then the narrower stripe there, I don't know if I want to mix them. You're calling out to me. I know, I appreciate it. I'll just have to read your transcript in the comments. Well, we're going to have to consider this because it is I who is pondering it. I don't think I want them as often as I had proposed in that last scenario. And this one does not need to be the same width as that one. But I didn't like it when it was wider, so I'm thinking maybe not so much. All right, I'm going to do this where I sew these two sections together, and then I'll put a narrower piece of this in between. I kind of quite like it. I wasn't sure I was going to, I'll be honest, but I do, and I like the effect that these half square triangle slices make. It's always a 45-degree angle, but it's in different places and flipped. You could do this with scraps not just the two colors I have here, but you could do it with a lot of different half square triangle scraps. Just find something that will help to pull them together, which may be this stripe or it may be something else entirely. It might be just a solid fabric. I like that. Let's take stock of what we've got today. Again, it looks like we haven't done very much, but we've done lots of thinking and pondering and deciding, right? What other piece did we do? I know there's one here somewhere. It is. This one's a wild and crazy kind of guy. I'm almost... All right, I'm going to lose 1/4 inch with seams. It just seems like this needs more. More on top or less on the bottom. Or do another curve, say with black or white. Kind of explored that. I think another curve like this would just be way too much. Way too much. I have to say, I would choose this as the one I'm liking the most. Whoops. Poor seam needs to be stabilized. It's what I'm liking most at the moment. How do these look together? I know. I love you too. Yeah. Need something in between. But, so here are 3 other options for stripes, or at least bases for them. This is just too wide. It's killing me. All right. I'm going to slice just a little bit off of each side. Still need to leave room for seam allowance. But it's just too much. You've been saying that to me all along, haven't you? Emily says, yep. Yep, yep, yep. I don't try that again. I don't anthropomorphize much at all, you've noticed. Well, it's better. It still needs more. Maybe it will be part of the bead squad once it was put into something, or maybe something over the top. We didn't try that on this one, did we? It's the wrong kind of blue for this, but yeah, I actually think that would help it, wouldn't it? Give it some more something there. So this one needs more, and I think that one probably does too, but it's something I want to leave until I decide what I'm going to do with it ultimately, and then does it need more, or do I need it to be relatively calm? I think I like this one just as is without further embellishment. At any rate, that is it for today. Sunday, this is Sunday, Karen. Wednesday, it's up in the air. We'll think of something. We'll do something. I want to do postcards at some point. But at this point, I'm going to sign off before I drive everyone over the edge. I hope to see you on Wednesday and next Sunday. In the meantime, in light of world events, I'm going to leave you with just peace.